Jerusalem. In the course of its tumultuous, sometimes glorious, often tragic history, Jerusalem was the object of all the lusts, hatreds, and all the adorations. Present without a moment's rest in the hearts of the Jews, since David made it a capital of a fragile as well as dazzling kingdom, and in their prayers after Solomon made it sacred by the construction of a temple, which is supposed to have surpassed in majesty the greatest buildings of her time. Jerusalem the rebellious, Jerusalem the prophetic, Jerusalem the conquered, lulled Jesus and saw the birth of Christianity, of which she remains the venerated founder. Centuries later, following harsh conquests, Islam also made it its own, so that Jerusalem became and remained a sacred city for the three monotheistic religions. Paris, headquarters of UNESCO, an international organization dedicated to the preservation of history, culture, and peace. On October 18, 2016, a new UNESCO resolution accusing Israel of occupying Jerusalem was to provoke deep emotions in the Western world by denying any connection between Judaism, Christianity, and the Temple Mount, defined only by its Arabic names, the Haram al-Sharif and the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
بالنسبة لقرار اليونسكو، هذا القرار الذي جاء لإحقاق الحق، حق المسلمين الرباني الذي بينه الله سبحانه وتعالى منذ 1400 عام.
This resolution, submitted by Algeria, Egypt, Lebanon, Morocco, Oman, Qatar, and Sudan, was to be approved by 24 countries, including Iran, Pakistan, Malaysia, Russia, and China. Most of the European countries abstained.
This resolution paper is not even worth the energy needed for tearing it to shreds. It will be much simpler and a lot more appropriate to place it in its rightful place, the garbage place of history. And this is the garbage, Madam Chairman, and this is the resolution, and this is the place for it.
These resolutions undermine support for the very legitimacy of this organization.
We believe that the decision of the UNESCO is a true reflection of the history of this site through 1400 years.
There were two possibilities, either to cry or to laugh. Since I know that crying will not help because UNESCO's attitude to Israel are well-known fact, so I laughed at it. It's all nonsense.
UNESCO, the first time in history, forgot that this is the Temple Mount, and they are using another expression. In the past, they used the two expressions. The Arab one, Haram el-Sharif, flesh, the Temple Mount. This distortion of history, it's a new thing from the last years, because the struggle on the sovereignty of Jerusalem.
When I heard about the decision of the UNESCO in September 2016 to deny any kind of relationship to the Temple Mount to Jews or Christians, but that this is only an Islamic place, I was really shocked.
It is a great pity that this caused a great shock for many peoples, because this is a reflection that these people are either not well aware about the history of Al-Aqsa Mosque, or they are misled by such a propaganda.
While Jews and most Christians, referring to their holy scriptures and to archaeological foundings, say that there was a temple on what used to be called the Temple Mount, Palestinians, followed by most of the Muslim world, claim that there was none, and that only the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock are part of the history to be remembered. That opens a new debate, which certainly needs to be resolved. Was there a temple on Temple Mount, or should this holy place for the three monotheistic religions be called only the Haram al-Sharif?
قرار اليونسكو الذي يؤكد ما نعتقده وما نؤمن به وما نثق به أن القدس وأن المسجد الأقصى بالذات وأن حائط البراق وساحة البراق كلها ملكية إسلامية فلسطينية خالصة.
It is most interesting that since the 90s of the 20th century, the Temple Mount not only became one of the most contested pieces of real estate in the world, but there was also a temple denial emerging. The temple denial is a misuse of history and misuse of historical concepts for present-day political purposes.
I am wondering what is the UNESCO thinking today when the Secretary General of the UN ties between the Jews and the Temple Mount?
It is clear for me that the Temple of Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans. It was a Jewish temple, as it is clear for me that Jerusalem is today a holy city for three religions. I mean, these are the facts.
Titus resolved to storm the temple the next day, early in the morning, with his whole army, and to encamp round about the holy house. While the holy house was on fire, everything was plundered that came on hand, and 10,000 of those that were caught were slain. The flame was also carried a long way and made an echo, together with the groans of those who were slain. And because this hill was high, and the works at the temple were very great, one would have thought the whole city of Jerusalem had been on fire.
That is the place where Solomon built the house of the Lord, and that building stood there for 400 years approximately. Then, after a short gap, we have the second temple inaugurated in 515 BC. That building, built by the returnees to Zion from the Babylonian captivity in the early Roman period, it was Herod the Great who always tried to compete with God. Where God made a mountain, he made it a flat terrain. So the present-day Temple Mount got its shape and its dimensions under Herod the Great.
The last three decisions of UNESCO concerning Jerusalem in general and especially the Temple Mount express, of course, the automatic majority of the Arabs in the United Nations institutions, where they can achieve any decision they want, even that the world is a flat land.
فلم يعني هناك منذ عام 67 حتى الآن واليهود يقومون بالحفر والتنقيب ولم يروا أي شيء يدل أو أثر يدل على الهيكل المزعوم. فهذا الهيكل مبني في يعني افتراء وكذبا في هذا المكان.
In Arabic they say الكذاب لازم أن يكون ذكور. The liar should have good memory. They have very bad memory. The booklet, A Brief Guide to Al-Haram al-Sharif, Jerusalem, published by the Supreme Muslim Council, 200 mils it costed in 1930. The Supreme Muslim Council was then headed by the Mufti Haj Amir al-Husseini, which is a very, very Jew-hater. He took part in the extermination of the Hungarian Jews in 1944. Now, what he writes in this book is very interesting. The Haram means it's the Temple Mount, historical sketch. He says here more than clearly, its identity with the site of Solomon's temple is beyond dispute. This is from 1962, when Jordan was still occupying East Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. In this map, they write Jordanians, not Zionists, Mount Moriah. And the Al-Aqsa is only in the south, Al-Aqsa Mosque. Al-Aqsa Mosque is in the south, while the whole place is Mount Moriah, as it appears in the Bible.
Some people would tell me, well, show me the remains of the temple. There are no remains of the temple. There was no temple. I'll tell them, you can't hold the stick in both ends. Let me excavate in the Temple Mount, I'll show you the remains.
When you dig around the Temple Mount, in the immediate vicinity of the Temple Mount, you find, of course, things which belong to the Temple Mount.
Recently, the Muslims have built one of the biggest mosques under the Temple Mount. And for this, they have just these big lorries taken out with big shovels and underneath. And this is the very one place that has never been excavated archaeologically. And so they just used it like a big bin and threw everything they found out into the ravines. And an archaeologist, Professor Gabriel Barkai, I think one of the greatest archaeologians we have in our lifetime, he has made it his task to collect all this dirt. I don't know, hundreds of lorries full of dirt, and he's now shifting now through all the details. It's a job of a lifetime.
For centuries, there was a very clear status quo upon the Temple Mount. There were two major edifices of the Muslims. The Dome of the Rock, which was meant by Abd al-Malik ibn al-Marwan, who built it and inaugurated it in 691 of the Common Era. It was meant to be a replacement of Solomon's Temple, a white rock instead of the black rock of Mecca. The second building was the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is south of the Dome of the Rock. Today, we have already 4 edifices. In 1999, a pit was dug, which was a criminal act. It is anti-civilized act, a barbaric act. It was carried out with bulldozers. And this is the most delicate point on earth, where even a toothbrush is too large a tool to carry out excavation. And the work was done with bulldozers.
When we saw the whole mud that was taken out from the stables, we understood that it's an archaeological disaster. But during the last years, we are digging at the mud that they took out outside of the old city, and it's a treasure. So in every bad issue, you have some good issues. So that's the good issue.
This pile, as you can see here, is one example of the piles that we took now from the area that they dump it, the Islamic Waqf. They dump it in a garbage site. We took it from those garbage sites to here to Rim Valley, and as you can see, we take buckets, fill the buckets, and get rid of most of the dirt that is not relevant. What you can see here, a glazed tile, okay? And this tile it's an Islamic work, and we saved all this material because it is a scientific project. By using water pressure, we get rid of all the dirt and start to collect all the material after we explain to them that you have to separate between glasses, mosaics, pottery. After they finish to separate all the material, each one of the participants, they separate each material to the specific buckets, and then all this material goes to the archaeologist that works at this corner, and they start to analyze the material. This pottery, this also a rim of a vessel, you can see, and this pottery is from the Second Temple period. How do we know that? By the shape, design, and pottery material also. This is the capital of a huge column that is dated to the Second Temple period, the Herodian Temple Mount, okay? How do we know that? By this shape, we call that Doric style.
When the Muslims came to Jerusalem, the sanctity which they attribute to the Temple Mount was because of Jewish traditions. And the interesting thing is that the Muslims themselves admit it. How did they call Jerusalem after the conquest? Bet el-Maqdas, the temple.
A few weeks ago, I published an article that talks about an ancient inscription coming from a mosque in a small village next to Hebron. It's called Nuba. Inside this mosque, we found an inscription that describes the Nuba area and all its boundaries, that was dedicated to the Dome of the Rock. They call it Bait al-Maqdis. In the name of Allah, the merciful God, this territory, Nuba, and all its boundaries and its entire area is an endowment to the Rock of Bait al-Maqdis and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, as it was dedicated by the commander of the faithful, Umar ibn al-Khattab, for the sake of Allah the Almighty.
I would like just to emphasize that Al-Aqsa Mosque, as it is today, which is about 144 denoms, is very important in Islamic faith. It is the place from which Muhammad ascended to heaven. It is the place for which Muslims turn their faces in for the prayer.
This is not true that Muslims are praying towards the direction of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Of course not. Since I was a child, I know that Muslims around the world, when they are praying, they are facing the direction of Mecca in Saudi Arabia and not the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Muhammad, after he moved to Medina in the year of 622, actually he ran away from Mecca because they wanted to kill him, he wanted to convince a group of Jews who lived in the city to convert to Islam. So he approached them and he saw that they are praying to the north, to Jerusalem. So he said, okay, we will also pray to Jerusalem. So it will ease the decision of the Jews to convert to Islam. But the Jews didn't bite.
Only when the Jews rejected him, he changed the Qibla, the direction of prayer towards Mecca. In 638, the second caliph of Islam, Omar ibn al-Khattab, came to Jerusalem and conquered it. In his army, he had a former Jew by the name Ka'b ibn al-Akhbar, and he told Omar about the significance of the Temple Mount, and therefore he built a wooden mosque there.
When he came, the Patriarch of Jerusalem, Sophronius, told him, we have got the center of the world in our place, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Omar was not convinced. So Ka'b al-Akhbar told him, we know where the center of the world is, and he took him to the Holy Rock, which is under the Dome of the Rock. And there are stories that it was covered with garbage, and Omar ordered to clean it.
And when you look into the maps from the Middle Ages, there you have the three parts of the world, and in the middle is Jerusalem, and in the middle is the temple. This is, of course, a concept that the Christians adopted from the Jewish world.
This area was left neglected for 550 years. If it is so important for Christianity and for Jesus Christ, I raise a question, why we don't have any church or we don't have any remarkable architecture in the Byzantine people or in that time?
It's super idiotic. In the late Roman period, there is a bridge leading to the Temple Mount, so it led nowhere. You cannot imagine that the Temple Mount was empty because the city in the early Christian period was so densely populated that it overflowed. We have also very rich finds of the early Christian period, the Byzantine period, from the 4th till the 7th century of the Common Era. We have coins, cruciform pendants, architectural members of ecclesiastic buildings. All that changes the history of the Temple Mount as it appears in written sources.
Omar knew that in the center of the Temple Mount, there is the center of the world. The Jewish tradition says the land of Israel is in the center of the world. Jerusalem in the center of the land of Israel. The Temple Mount in the center of Jerusalem, and the Holy Rock in the center of the Temple Mount. The question was where to build the mosque, because the conquerors, everywhere they came, they built, first of all, a mosque. Ka'b al-Akhbar suggested to build it north of the Holy Rock. So Omar told him, I know what you mean. You mean the Jews who converted but not 100% sure When they pray in the north and they have to pray towards Mecca, then they pray from the north, they will pray to the Holy Rock because that's the holy place. So we will build it south.
بالنسبة للآيات والأحاديث، أولا أن هنا كان مسجدا، والرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم لما سئل عن أول مسجد تكلم أن المسجد الأول هو مكة المكرمة، وثاني مسجد بني على وجه الأرض هو المسجد الأقصى المبارك، وهذا ما بينه الرسول عليه الصلاة والسلام، وأن بينهما 40 عاما، يعني الذي بنى مكة المسجد المكة هو آدم عليه السلام، والذي بنى المسجد الأقصى إما آدم أو أبناءه.
To say even by UNESCO or by any other United Nations association, the Temple Mount is not a Jewish land, and the rock is not the rock of Moriah, and the Western Wall is not a Jewish west wall of the temple. It's like to take the dish, to put it in front of the sun and say, well, there's no sun. It's not going to work.
The Triple Gate was one of the most important entrances to the Temple Mount. And what we see today, we see the remains of this entrance. As you can see here, these stones, you can see very clearly one of the edges of the entrance. As you can see, the Herodian style of curving stones. By using a gentle curve at the frame of the stones, Jewish used to come through these gates and worship God.
We have finds which illuminate the history of the Temple Mount for pagans, for Israelites, for Judeans, for Jews, for Christians, for Muslims, and for all others who participated in this historical episode of the Temple Mount.
We are now at the Ophel. The Ophel comes from the ancient Hebrew. We find this word in the Bible.
So we have here several bullae. This is a very significant bulla. This is approximately 2,600 years old. It has preserved two words, Gibeon and Lamelech, belonging to the king. Shipment of taxes sent in kind from the city of Gibeon to the king's treasury in Jerusalem. This is a fiscal bulla.
We are standing here next to an ancient wall dated to the 10th century BC. Archaeologists describe this wall as a wall that was built by King Solomon. This style is very familiar also on other sites in Israel and in the Mediterranean area.
This is an arrowhead of early First Temple period, somewhere around the 10th century BC. We have here another arrowhead on the 2nd century BC from the battles of the Maccabees against the Seleucid Greeks.
We are here now at one of the biggest gates from the biblical Jerusalem, from the First Temple period, date to the 10th and 9th century BC. When Dr. Eilat Mazar digs here, she found those vessels, monumental vessels. The inscription that you can see here is written in Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, from the First Temple period. And it says, Lamed, Shin, Resh, Hey, Aleph, Vav. We can understand that those vessels was used as store jars for the date juice. We are here next to the Western Wall, and we can see also very clearly the Herodian style. One of the most important findings that was found here came by the destruction of this area that was made by the Roman soldier. This stone came from the edge of the corner of the Temple Mount. It fell down first and all the other stones fell on it. This stone has an inscription on it, as you can see here. This was the specific place that they used to stand and sound the horn. It's a very, very, very important evidence. All the people all over Jerusalem knew that Shabbats or the holiday is coming.
In addition, we have finds from the Second Temple in abundance, starting from Persian period remains, Hellenistic period remains. During Second Temple period, the temple taxes were accepted by the temple authorities in a certain currency only. and it was not American dollar. It was the shekels of the city of Tyre. So people had to change money when they came to the Temple Mount. Otherwise, they could not enter. Jesus, short time before crucifixion, chased away the money changers from the Temple Mount and turned upside down the counters. This is a coin of half a shekel made of silver. It has the inscription, Yerushalem Kedosha, or Holy Jerusalem. On the other side, it is written, Chatzi HaShekel, half a shekel. We have the original flooring, which is referred by Flavius Josephus.
This pattern here is called sort of a four squares pattern. One square, inside it a second square, inside it a third square, inside it a fourth square. And here on the Temple Mount, we appear to have a four square pattern. We can construct this because we have specifically large tiles, medium tiles, and small tiles.
It is probably the work of a team sent by Emperor Augustus to his friend Herod the Great. So we have some of the original pieces, something that enabled us to reconstruct the pattern. They fit the exact dimensions of the fractions of the Roman foot. So this framework is exactly one Roman foot.
Now this temple, as I have already said, was built upon a strong hill. The cloisters were in breadth 30 cubits, while the entire compass of it was by measure 6 furlongs, including the Tower of Antonia. Those entire courts that were exposed to the air were laid with stones of all sorts and all colors. As to the holy house itself, which was placed in the midst of that most sacred part of the temple, it was ascended to by 12 steps, and in front its height and its breadth were equal.
So many things were discovered, like inscriptions, for example. Inscriptions which we know from Josephus Flavius. The inscription which forbids a Gentile trespassing into the temple.
There were notes made out of stones saying and warning every non-Jew not to enter beyond this wall, because the one who will do it will be judged to death. In the 19th century, the Ottoman archaeologists found one note of stone like this, and it's in an exhibition in the museums in Istanbul even today.
In 1864, an engineer and archaeologist by the name of Charles Wilson arrived in Jerusalem. His first task was mapping the city. In early 1867, about 2 years after Wilson's discoveries, another Brit, Charles Warren, dug shafts at Wilson's Arch and reached down to the original bedrock infrastructure. Wilson and Warren were among the first to uncover the northern continuation of the Western Wall, but had difficulty continuing organized excavations due to difficulties caused by the Ottomans. Only after the Six-Day War and the reunification of Jerusalem were the excavations of the Western Wall tunnels renewed, with the goal of uncovering the entire length of the Western Wall.
All what we know, that there is a small pagan temple, we don't know who really constructed it, where is the exact location and how it was disappeared.
نبوخذ النصر يقول يعني هنا يعني الله سبحانه وتعالى يروي في عن هلاك اليهود وعن خراب الهيكل المزعوم، وهو ربما يكون في مصر، لأن اليهود كانوا في مصر وتاهوا في الصحراء وغير ذلك.
No Palestinian archaeologist ever tried to contact me to come or to dig in Jerusalem or something like that. So if you ask me whether we cooperate with Palestinian archaeologists, if they want to cooperate, of course we'll be glad to cooperate with every archaeologist.
Of course, the indisputable historical fact, there were Jewish temples on the Temple Mount. But in recent years, the Palestinians have been claiming that these never existed, that it only was ever a mosque at any time in history. And this is, of course, historical nonsense.
The Temple Mount is described by the sages of the Talmud, who hated the guts of Herod and hated whatever is connected with Herod. They describe it as he who didn't see Herod's building didn't see a magnificent building in his lifetime.
Tacitus is quoted as saying that when Titus had conquered Jerusalem in the year 70, Titus summoned his council and before taking action consulted it whether he should overthrow a sanctuary of such workmanship, that is the marvelous building of the temple, since it seemed to many that a sacred building, one more remarkable than any other human work, should not be destroyed. If preserved, it would testify to the moderation of the Romans.
Exactly as Christians, as priests from the Holy Land, we believe this is our Holy Land. Here born our Lord. Jesus Christ was Jewish and he spoke Aramaic language, the language from the Talmud. As priest, I believe what the Bible says. The Torah, the Tanakh, the Old Testament and the New Testament. This is Jewish land.
The Christians had a very, very dichotomic relation with the Temple Mount. Then the Muslims took over. To begin with, relations were not bad, but slowly, relations deteriorated, especially after the fall of the Umayyad dynasty in 750.
Well, we can see that the importance of the Temple Mount is coming to the forefront in Islam 2.5 times. Half the time was in the 7th century when the Dome of the Rock was built in order to make a political statement for Marwan. And it was not a mosque, as we all know. It is built according to the octagonal buildings of the churches at that time. The Crusaders came in the 12th century when the Muslims also took an interest in that place. Israel was established in 1948 when Jerusalem again became important for Islam. Again, replacement theology.
Since the Palestinians and their supporters claim there was no temple, they're not merely denying the Old Testament or Hebrew Bible of the Jews, they're denying the New Testament as well as the Old Testament of the Christians. They're saying that the Gospels are lying when they mention Jesus visiting the temple and Acts of the Apostles and Paul and everybody else who mentions the temple are all lies.
If the Arabs and the Muslims they want to live in the Jerusalem, they must believe this is Jerusalem, this is not Al-Quds. If they believe this is the capital from the Israel state, they can live here and to live with harmony.
نحييكم، نحيي المرابطات والمرابطين، نحيي كل ذرة دم أريقت في سبيل القدس، فهي دماء نظيفة، دماء نقية، دماء في سبيل الله إن شاء الله، وكل شهيد سيكون في الجنة وكل جريح سيكتب له الله الثواب. هذا الأقصى لنا والقيامة لنا، كلها لنا، لا يحق لهم أن يدنسوها بأقدامهم القذرة، فلن نسمح لهم، وسنعمل كل ما نستطيع من أجل حماية القدس.
الله سبحانه وتعالى قد قرر في كتابه أن القدس جزء من العقيدة الإسلامية، جزء من القرآن الكريم الذي نتعبد الله سبحانه وتعالى به. وقد قرر القرآن الكريم قبل اليونسكو وقبل أي شعوب أخرى أن المسجد الأقصى هو مسجد للمسلمين، مسجد للمسلمين وحدهم، لقوله تعالى: سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله.
You know, the problem of the Al-Aqsa Mosque that you have is so many stories about its history. One of the histories that I heard about the Al-Aqsa Mosque, that Al-Aqsa Mosque is never ever been created in Jerusalem. It is somewhere in Saudi Arabia.
Jerusalem is the site in which Muhammad had his nocturnal flight on his legendary mare.
Once in a while he was going to Taif. It's a city in the Arab Peninsula to the east from Mecca. When he was walking to Taif, the way was 2 days' walk. He used to spend the night in a village named Ji'rana. And in the morning when he woke up, he used to pray in one of 2 mosques which were near Ji'rana. One was closer to the village, and it was named the closer mosque, Al-Masjid Al-Adna, and the other one was further from the mosque, and it was called the further mosque, Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. One morning, he woke up in Mecca with a new revelation, which is stated in the Quran in chapter 17, which says, glory to Allah, who took his servant at night from the holy mosque, which is Mecca, to the further mosque, which is near Ji'rana. His companions understood it very well because they know exactly what the further mosque is.
All is legends. Of course, a nocturnal flight, a miraculous mare, Gabriel bringing him, all that is stories. The Muslims take this as historical fact, whereas the big stones, the finds and everything is meaningless to them.
The Prophet died in 632. 50 years later, there was a rebellion against the government which was in Damascus already, by the Umayyads. Because of various reasons, they did not let the people from Damascus area come to pilgrimage, to Hajj, to Mecca. So the Caliph Yazid collected his ulama, means the wise people, what to do with this? Because the Hajj is an obligatory mission to go every year, we have to do it. So he came with an idea. Let's take Jerusalem as an alternative place for pilgrimage. So they tell him, hey, but Jerusalem is not mentioned in the Quran. And Jerusalem is not mentioned in the Quran. How can we convince the people to come to Hajj, to Jerusalem? So he said, you remember this verse in the Quran? Glory to Allah who took his servant from the holy mosque to the further mosque, Al-Aqsa. Let's tell the people that Al-Aqsa is in Jerusalem.
It's always politics. Historical truth doesn't matter. For example, the Kotel, the Western Wall praying plaza. Why is it they always stress it? Because Jews are praying there. All the traditions, the ancient traditions, say that when Muhammad came to Jerusalem, he came from the south, the double gate. And there he tethered his mare, whose name in Arabic is Burak. But a 15th century writer wrote, the Mughrabi gate must be the gate through which Muhammad came, because I don't know any southern gate, because it was already blocked. So the Mufti of Jerusalem, this villain, this Nazi, Hajj Amin al-Husseini, he thought, that's a good idea. If 15th century man, a historian, very important one, Giradin, says that the Mughrabi gate is the gate through which Muhammad came to the temple, then he tethered his horse down below and he started to call the western wall Al-Burak. And he said, this is a holy place for us, not for the Jews. Moreover, in order to disturb the Jews, he sent donkeys to leave their droppings in the place, to leave their feces on the site. This is your holy place?
وهذا إحقاق الحق أن هذا حق خالص للمسلمين. المسجد الأقصى بكل مساحته 144 دنم، وأيضا ساحة البراق وحائط البراق الذي يدعي اليهود أنه لهم أحقية به.
And under a Jordanian regime, including under the British mandate, they were barely allowed to go to the Western Wall. It's a chaotic situation. For Jews not to be allowed to go to the most holy place. Try to imagine all other religions. Can you imagine that Muslim will not be allowed to go to Mecca and Medina or to Al-Aqsa? Can you imagine that Christians will not allow to get into the Church of Nativity or to go to the Vatican in Rome?
Islam, according to its own view, came to the world to replace Judaism and Christianity, not to live side by side with them, because Islam, according to its own terminology, it's Din al-Haq, means religion of truth, while Judaism and Christianity are Din al-Batil, religion of falsehood.
Between 48 and 67, Jerusalem was under Jordanian rule. They did everything to eliminate Jewish remains in the country. They desecrated the Jewish cemetery on Mount of Olives, which is the holiest cemetery in Judaism. All the Jews who lived, let's say, in the Jewish quarter were expelled to the western part of town.
وقد شرف النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم مسجدنا بالصلاة فيه، وقد جمعت له الأنبياء في هذا المسجد. جمع الأنبياء للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فصلى بهم إماما، إشارة إلى أن هذا الدين دين الإسلام هو دين خاتم للأديان كلها.
It is only an approach which unfortunately doesn't leave room for others who are not Muslims to live in peace and to live in happiness.
Muhammad was accused when he was alive. They accused him, the whole Islam or the Quran is Asatir al-Awwalin. It appears in the Quran 11 times. Asatir al-Awwalin means the stories or the legends of the first ones. Means that he takes material from the first ones, from the Jews and Christians, and he recycles these stories. So in order to negate this idea, he claimed that Judaism is falsehood and Christianity as well, and only Islam is Din al-Haq, the religion of truth. What happens in the 20th century is a disaster, because we Jews come back to our land, come back to our country, to our sovereignty, and you know, according to Islam, a Jew has the right to live as dhimmi, under the auspice of Islam. And here we are, coming back to our land, resuming our sovereignty, resuming our ownership to our land, and this is something which Islam cannot fathom, because this means that Judaism comes back to life.
For 19 years, Jerusalem was under Jordan. Not one king, not one president, not one prime minister of Muslim countries came to visit Jerusalem. When the Palestinians are speaking today, it's about a Palestinian state with Jerusalem, its capital. I say, why? What historical background? Never was it a capital.
There are photos of the Al-Aqsa and the whole Temple Mount with high weed growing from between the tiles, which shows that people didn't walk on this place for many years.
Jerusalem was left standing in ruins, even without the wall, for hundreds of years. When British authors came to describe Jerusalem, they said it's a dumping place. Dirt is floating through Jerusalem, and very few people are living here, and so on. Then Israel was established in 1948, and Jerusalem became the eternal capital of the State of Israel. And that was a moment when Jerusalem again became important for Islam.
Our right in Jerusalem, in East Jerusalem, is better than anybody else, because we took it as a matter of self-defense in front of an aggressive attack by Jordan on our part of Jerusalem.
It's hard even for a leader like Yasser Arafat to ignore the Temple Mount as a part of the Israeli Jewish history. Although he tried, but the main efforts were done by the extreme Islamic movement in Israel, led by Sheikh Raed Salah, who started by labeling the issue as Al-Aqsa fi Khataw, which means Al-Aqsa Mosque is in danger.
أن تتعجل بإعلان حرب إعلامية هجومية على الاحتلال الإسرائيلي تفضح كل كذبه، تفضح كل جرائمه، وتفضح كل وجوده، وتدعو إلى زوال هذا الوجود الاحتلالي فوراً، وإلا الأقصى في خطر والخطر يزداد يوماً بعد يوم.
To speak about Al-Aqsa in danger, when the biggest mosque was built when Israel is the ruler of Jerusalem, it's a lie, it's a joke, and it's everything but not to tell the truth. What happened in the last few years, they are trying to launch a new initiative to label the whole Temple Mount as Al-Aqsa. I'm sure that you haven't visited Mecca and Medina because you're not allowed to. If you're not Muslim and there is a sign at the entrance to Mecca that says Muslims only, Muslim faqat. And what they are trying to do, to enhance it, so people will think that the whole Temple Mount is Al-Aqsa. And Al-Aqsa is not allowed to go by someone who is not Muslim.
ويعترف بأحقية المسلمين بهذا المكان وقدسية هذا المكان للمسلمين، ولهم أن يأخذوا أماكن عبادتهم دون أن يتعرضوا ويتنافسوا في هذا المكان الذي أقره الله سبحانه وتعالى وأقره أيضا اليونسكو في هذه القرارات التي اتخذها أخيرا لإحقاق حق المسلمين.
About this, I want to have two remarks. First of all, I proved by historical and archaeological that this place is holy for the Jews, not less, but even more for the Muslims. I respect their mosques, I respect their belief. Please respect our belief as Jews, especially as we, not like you, have very good proofs, definite proofs, solid proofs that our temples were there.
Those who forget the Bible and place their word into the center, there we find Palestinianism is the mainline thinking today. That reminds us very much of the time of Nazi Germany, where Jesus was a Galilean, because Galilee allegedly was not part of Israel. At any rate, Jesus at that time in Nazi Germany was an Aryan, and he was blonde and probably spoke German. So there we have this kind of fantasy which has nothing to do with reality.
I hope Jerusalem to be strong, to be blessed, to live all together here in Jerusalem, to live together with harmony, with love, with peace. This is the land of God, and we need to live together how the God He wants us to live.
If you ask me what is a just solution, the division of the Temple Mount between the Jews and the Muslims is the same as we did in the cave of our ancestors in Hebron.
The Jews have built up Jerusalem in a beautiful way. Jerusalem today is a marvel. It is growing, it's pretty, and I think Herod the Great, who built Jerusalem once 2,000 years ago and built the Temple of Jerusalem, he would maybe be even jealous to see how much the modern Israel and modern Jewish people the state of Israel has done to build up this city.
Reconciliation, coexistence, and sharing everything. Without these three principles, I don't believe that ever peace will take place among the Israelis and the Palestinians.
Jerusalem will remain under Israeli sovereignty. Everybody will be able to go to his holy place like it happens today. But to think that Israel is going to give up the Temple Mount and to hand it over and to label it as Al-Aqsa, it's not going to work.